there's a problem. And the left doesn't want to talk about why, because that gets into what does it take to actually fix this problem. And it would help the black community. It would help all of America. The left doesn't want to have that conversation. And they want to call anyone who wants to have an honest conversation about that racist.
I think it's because you want a victim narrative. You can go to these neighborhoods and say, it's not your fault. Vote for us and we'll fix it. It's them. They're demagoguing. And so I had a great interview with Christian Maxwell. She's running in Illinois CD1. She's a conservative running in a D+18 district, agreeing with Trump, saying we need the National Guard. And she's talking about how they're lying to everybody. They're saying that the National Guard's going to come in and start rounding people up and going. That's not at all what they're going to do. They're going to come in and provide assistance to the local governments, freeing up resources for police. Police can get back to doing their jobs. When you're talking about the problem in the culture, I'll tell you this. I'm from one city, and everyone knows I'm from Chicago. I've been screaming about it. But forgive me, Trump is talking about sending in the National Guard, and I'm here to say I agree as someone from Chicago, and I will tell you this. There are many neighborhoods in Chicago that, and they're all segregated by race for the most part. There's white areas, Hispanic areas, black areas. And when you look at a lot of the high crime areas, guess what? Predominantly black. However, when you look at Hyde Park, it's got double the national average, more than double the national average of the black population, and lower than average crime. The issue? The black families that live there are well off, educated, just like any other lower crime neighborhood. You're going to see higher rates of successful professionalism. And I think we have a cultural issue that 100 years of Democratic rule has entrenched intentionally. The issue is not the race. The issue is not genetic or anything like that. The issue is there is a culture that I've personally experienced where they tell the kids in the neighborhood, don't act white and you have to be hard. They tell them things like, I swear, I'm hanging out with some of my friends on the South Side and it's 3 black kids. We were going skateboarding and when they were talking, one of them said, well, I haven't been to jail yet, but, and I'm like, whoa, bro, don't go to jail. Like, why are you talking like that, man? Because that's what they're told in their neighborhood. You will go to jail. It's going to happen. That's the way it goes. As if they're telling these kids, if you want to go hard and you don't want to act white, you will do things that will put you in jail. And I'm like, man, you guys got to get out of that stuff. Mm-hmm. Make money, get paid. One of my favorite stories ever was this black dude in my neighborhood who sold T-shirts. I've told the story a million times. Forgive me, but for those that didn't hear it. And he was ragging on the drug dealers, saying you make more money selling T-shirts than selling dope. And then he told this story about how, not a story, but like literally does. He said he calls the local venues for the weekends, he figures out who the bands are. He calls the bands and says, do you have merch? And if they don't, I'll make merch for you and I'll give you 20% of everything I sell. And he was like, bro, I make like $2-3 grand a week, working 2 days a week. He's like, I go to the print shop. I literally just put the band's graphic, their own graphic on a shirt. I go to their show and I sit there and I sell it. I give the band 20%. I make a couple grand. And he was like, why that? You selling dope, man? It's because the people in the neighborhood are telling them that's the way you do it. Mm-hmm. Even though they didn't make that much money, they put themselves at risk. And then the problem is when I say stuff like this, when I point out the high crime rates, it's people like Brian Stelter and the corporate press who say, you're racist. The actual reality is the cops are doing it on purpose. And I'm like, dude, you're not going to tell me that the gangbangers in the LeClaire courts where I was growing up in Chicago were oppressed, and that's why they came to my neighborhood and robbed all my friends. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, well, it's like kind of what you're hitting on is like specifically the cultural component. Is we shouldn't be surprised at all that there's this huge disparity because I mean, within the black community, but broadly in America, there's huge anti-white rhetoric going on, and it's like you shouldn't be surprised when whites are demonized. You're going to get an increase in violence towards them. I mean, everyone's scratching their heads, and it's like
it's also a high rate of fatherlessness and a lot of nihilism because they're generationally, they have no meaning because they're seeing what's around them, and it's a lot of drugs and gangbanging, and so they don't have any life to live for. A lot of these young kids, they'll die young because of it.
This is what really blew my mind. I don't think I've ever had any kind of like traditional red pilling. Like Dave Rubin was a liberal, and then he was like, "Holy crap, something's wrong." I was always kind of middle of the road when I was younger. I was a little bit left, but I'll tell you, in the 2010s, I did a documentary on St. Louis, Ferguson, and I can tell you all about how the structures that were set up during the segregation, during the period of segregation, resulted in a systemically racist circumstance. That is, the cops in the St. Louis jurisdictions are not inherently racist. Like the white cop doesn't say, oh boy, I'm going to go pull over a bunch of black people. What happens is there's like 99 different jurisdictions. So if you have a busted taillight, you have to drive through 5 towns to get to work, and you're only driving 5 miles, you get pulled over 5 times, you get 5 tickets, you can't afford it. These jurisdictions in St. Louis were intentionally set up as enclaves for white people who are leaving the cities because of it's very, very complicated. But I mentioned Pruitt-Igoe, one of the first project housing systems set up in the United States. It was left underdeveloped. They didn't take care of it. It fell apart. Then crime started to take over, and then it fell apart. Then you ended up with this heavily impoverished area living in a giant slum. White people leave. They created smaller townships. Now you've got all these different police jurisdictions, and you've got pockets of black neighborhoods that are still struggling to get out of that cycle of poverty. But what the left will tell you, it's the white cop is racist and hates black people. I'm like, no. The white cop literally has no idea. He's just like, I don't know, man, your taillight was out. You can't do that. You got to get it fixed. But what happens when you've got a whole bunch of small jurisdictions? So in places like Chicago, you had redlining and blockbusting, and that's where the real estate market negatively impacted black families, made it harder for them to generate wealth in their properties, and it did create these weights on these communities. But I'll tell you this, the solution to it is not what the left is offering up, and that's where it got confusing to me when I'm like, hey guys, like when we talk about redlining, that's where the real estate company like would collude to be like, only sell to black people in these neighborhoods to keep them out of the white neighborhoods. When they would do something like that, you create impoverished neighborhoods. And when I would talk to the left about this, they'd be like, no, don't bring that up. Just bring up the racist cops. And I'm like, this would solve the problem. Like we can address the problem and make this problem go away. No, they don't care. They didn't care.
And that's the thing is that everyone admits that historically, and even until relatively recently, there were hurdles as a community that they have faced. But the problem is that the answers the left have been providing clearly aren't working. The data is showing that it's not working. And so we have to admit that before we can and have a conversation as to why it's not working and be able to have that conversation in a setting where you're not being called a racist or canceled or fired from your job. And if we can do that, then we can actually find some answers to this problem. But again, I don't think that the left politically wants to solve this problem. There's too much for them to lose.
They will lose votes.
Yeah.
They will lose their cult narrative. Let's jump to this next story. Ladies and gentlemen, I have an article from Wikipedia. This is titled the Wikipedia Articles for Deletion, Killing of Irina Zarutska. Now, why would this be nominated for deletion? So the article discussing Irina Zarutska's killing was nominated for deletion, and up until just now, it was facing deletion until users came in and said, what the? No, you can't delete this. This is absolutely wild. Thanks for checking out this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to watch the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Subscribe to this channel, and we will see you all there.